Hello and good evening, everyone. I am your host, Nika Cherrelles, and this is the ItCast Real Talk. The ItCast is our community outreach podcast that aims to increase diversity in conversations on health and sexuality. Through this work, we are creating a world where all people feel loved, honored, and respected. Visit our Patreon to support the ItCast and learn more about our work at nikacherrelles.com. That's NIKACHERRELLES.com. Also, subscribe to the YouTube channel and please share this work with all of your community. This week's topic is Real Talk on Racism. And today in the booth, we have my best friend, Melinda Gray, joining us. Melinda, please come on in and say hello. Hi. Oh, I'm so excited about this talk.
Thank you for having me.
Yes, thank you so much for being here. This is awesome. So before we dive into the heart of the matter, tell everyone a little bit about like your cultural background, how you identify, so they can relate to you.
Yeah, well, so first of all, I'm very grateful to have this opportunity to have a conversation with you, and I was very honored that you asked me to have this conversation. And the background for all of you guys is, like Nika said, we are best friends. We used to live together. And I recently got married last year and had a baby. And we've been talking even more recently about the topic of race because my son is half white and half African. And so that's my background of what really has brought me to have this conversation with you and what kind of brought on the conversation today.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And talk a bit about why you chose, like why you're committed to talking about this topic.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
So, I'm really committed to having these type of conversations to really make a difference for my son, for the world that he's going to grow into, and having a greater understanding of race and equality. And I think that it's an everybody conversation that all people can relate to this topic and can do their part in some way. And it's definitely hit a lot closer to home recently with my son. But I want to make sure that my son grows up in a world where he's safe and free and treated like everybody else.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So you talked about race as an everybody conversation, which I think is really, really huge. And one of the things that I want to talk about is like who actually participates in racism and who benefits from racism. So let's talk about that.
Okay. Well, I know we've talked backstories. We've talked a lot about this subject, and being best friends, of course, we would. But I think the everybody conversation comes into play because there are people that feel like it's not a conversation for them to have. And that kind of stops the conversation from actually happening in the first place. Yeah. And it is an everybody conversation. It's every race has some part to play in the construct of racism. And of course, when it comes to who benefits from racism, I would undoubtedly say that white people benefit the most from racism. It's a universal experience that people refer to as white privilege. The privilege of being treated as a white person, and then you have to look at the flip side of that. And so
right, and how other people get treated in that context. Yeah. And you're absolutely right. I mean, like everybody participates in racism. Like there are prejudices across all lines in all directions, and it really does make it matters to actually acknowledge that versus like I'm not going to participate in that conversation, or to have it where we're only talking about it in our own subgroups and our own bubbles and not making a difference where the lines actually meet. Mm-hmm. So this is great. So I'm really excited about this one. I want to talk about the nuances of racism, like how it actually shows up today. You know, like we're not talking 50 or 100 years ago. We're not even talking 20 years ago. We're talking about like today, the the nuances and the insidiousness of it. So, please share. Let us like, what are some of the things that you've seen?
Um, well, there's definitely been many different experiences that we've had together, that I've had with my son, that I've had in the conversation of being in a biracial marriage. And it isn't something that we've overcome. Otherwise, a lot of these situations wouldn't have happened or wouldn't be the way that they are now. So when you say like a current situation, I can give you a share of personal. Is like there are phrases and things that we say as a community or as groups or specific groups of community that are outdated phrases that also perpetuate racism. And one that comes to my mind is free white and over 21. And it's an expression I've heard countless times. And I don't believe that it's intended in those times to be a hurtful remark, but it does really acknowledge the fact that there's an ultimate white privilege, and that when you have that privilege, you can think of yourself as having the ultimate freedom, which is what that phrase is saying. Is
Right.
I'm free, white, and over 21. I have all the freedom, and it's it's a pretty outdated negative comment when you think about it.
Yeah.
But people don't always see it that way.
Right. I mean, because like it seems innocuous, like, oh, we're gonna celebrate just, the homies or the people or whatever.
Mm.
And then not actually like owning the context free white and over 21. It's like, what are you implying about people who are not white?
Mm-hmm.
What are you implying with the context of free versus not free? And it broke my heart the first time that you shared that with me. I was just like, wow, like that's something that it makes sense that I wouldn't be privy to that kind of discussion. And I can see why they don't see that as harmful, because it's not a part of the paradigm that they're in. So you shared already about being in a mixed race marriage.
Yeah.
And I know that that's one of the things like that brings things up too.
Yeah.
That brings up a lot. Is there anything that you'd like to share from that? Just like
Yeah, I mean, it's a different experience when you're in a biracial marriage where people can look at you and automatically have a judgment versus, other couples could be just walking down the street. They don't have people looking at them and creating opinions about them. And I've definitely experienced it. How could you not? But I think the times that bother me the most are from people that I care about. And that's come up too. And it's not that they don't love me or think less of me. It's just, again, it brings up people's opinions and their judgments and criticisms. And it's fallen to be received on my side and, of course, by my people, right? So, I've been told directly by people that I know love me, that I love, that they don't believe in mixed race marriages or mixed race children. And of course, that's going to really hurt my feelings. But that's also why I want to have this conversation, is because, I want my son to grow up in a place where he's totally not seen that way by just strangers.
Yeah.
Who look at him and automatically have a judgment.
Yeah. Automatic judgments. Yeah. Let's volume up a little bit. So talking about automatic judgments, you shared some things with me about the way that people relate to your baby that I didn't even occur in my reality. Can you talk a bit about like some of the comments that people make when they see your son?
Yeah, I mean, I will say that I don't think it's coming from a negative place, but it does bother me. Like, I'll be out with my son and people will say, oh, he's so cute. But then their first question or real remark would be, well, what is he? Like, what's his ethnicity? And it's like, well, what is he? Like, why is that the first thing that you think to ask me?
Right.
And I don't even know you.
And why does it matter? He's human.
Yeah, he's just a cute baby.
He is.
But people have that, you could say curiosity, but the fact that it's the first thing, I think people have a desire to really determine your ethnicity. Like, what are you?
Yeah. That like outward lens, like, and I'm not gonna lie, I've done it too, where I look at someone and then I just assume, like there's a whole conversation around tribalism. If I'm looking at you, it's like, can I relate to you? Do I think I can relate to you based on looks? And that has nothing to do with relatability. But I've absolutely fallen into that conversation myself. This conversation whenever a baby is born, and especially for me in the Black community, it's like, are they going to be fairer skinned or are they going to be darker skinned? And the lighter they are, the more accepted they're going to be in society, the better their life is going to be. Like, there's a whole conversation around the color spectrum, and I've seen it like as a Black person. And then like hearing about this, it's like people like just don't even assume that you as a white woman could have a child that's not also white. And that's a stinger. That's like, are we really perpetuating this conversation?
Yeah, it definitely, the first few times that question came to me, it kind of really hit me, because it was like, wait, I don't even know you. But yeah, people have a desire to really create a category. Okay, he's obviously not white, is basically what they're saying too, in a way.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Apologies. I'm looking just kind of at where we've gone in the conversation, and I want to circle back to the conversation around mixed race families, mixed race experiences, and the things that we hear generationally. It's like our parents had beliefs and their parents had beliefs, and I've seen it. Like, I date all different types of people, and I've had moments in my past where I'm just like, I may have a child by someone of another race, but they're still going to be Black. And that's something that, I'm actually just kind of discovering it in this moment where I'm like, they're always going to be Black no matter what they're mixed with. And that also takes away from that context of like who they are in their entire personhood. And I've not heard it in my own family, like not believing in mixed race marriages or families, but I see where like that kind of thing, like it perpetuates supremacy, in my opinion.
Yeah, I can definitely see that. It's I think it's obviously prejudiced to say that you don't believe in mixed race marriages, couples, or mixed race children. And it's definitely landed that way to me, when it's been said to me. But it's hard to change those opinions. I think that the best thing to do is to be willing to have the conversations about it.
Yeah.
And to acknowledge that it's still like that for a lot of people.
It is definitely, and racism hasn't gone anywhere. I think it looks different. Oh, this is so great. We're getting some really good comments. Thank you everyone out there who's watching and like being a part of this conversation with us. Just to let you know, like, people are really like, they're like, sorry to hear that happened, and it's really, really messed up. We do have a question. So When people say they don't believe, do they think your son or your marriage is a fantasy?
That's a good question. No, I think it's more of it's a judgment, right? It's a criticism. It's a saying like, I mean, I like that question though, because it's like, obviously,
right.
The baby's right here. But yeah, it's definitely an open, when someone says that to you, knowing, that you're in a mixed race marriage and you have a mixed race child, it's a pretty open criticism, right? And it shows you that you're facing, if someone's willing to say that to your face, you're facing that out in the world. And that's something that, my son's going to come up against. And I'm going to come up against when we're out and about as our family.
Yeah. Do you think that when people are asking these questions, they actually think that it's a racist thing that they're doing?
Oh, the question of what is he, what's his race?
Yeah.
I don't think they see that, no. And I don't think most of the time it's necessarily intended that way. But I think the fact that that's the first thing that you ask, it really does point to this is something that is really in the background all the time.
Yeah. And then the same question to the, like not believing in it. Like, do you think that they hear themselves as perpetuating the problem?
Oh, that's a good question.
Or the system that is racism?
Well, that would be like an inner criticism, right, on your own opinion. So probably not.
Yeah, that's a good point.
They probably don't think that way.
You have to be aware.
You would have to think that way of thinking is not good, which they think that way, right? So I don't think so, no. And I think that's maybe part of the point, is that to point it out that it's there.
Yeah. And I think the more we point it out and the more we actually point out the follies and the way that people slip or do the things that they do, it's going to help us root out racism a lot more. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think this is really great. I was talking to my brother earlier, and we were talking about racism and whether or not you prefer your racism up front or in the shadows. And I thought that was a really good question.
It is a good question. I don't know if I have an answer to that one. Because it's confronting when it's up front.
I know.
But it's not much better when it's like in the shadows either.
It's absolutely not. And it's dangerous. But I thought a really good point was made in that racism is in hiding these days.
Yeah.
And I think that actually shows a little bit of progress, because if racism is in hiding, that means that we have an opportunity to continue healing. If racism was out and like more in our faces, we would be rewinding decades, if not centuries.
Yeah, that's a good point of view.
So I thought that was really, really powerful.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Ooh, yeah, someone said upfront because microaggressions are shit. That's real. That's real. And you've been experiencing a bunch of microaggressions.
Yeah, you could say that.
Yeah.
But that's how it is when it's in the shadows.
Or macroaggressions.
And we are in the Bay Area. You can be anywhere watching this video, but in the Bay Area, I would say it's definitely more in the shadows.
Yes.
And then you go to other places where it might be a lot more upfront.
Yeah.
It's a different experience.
That's real. I'm originally from the Midwest, and so I've seen a lot of it in an upfront fashion. And being out here in the Bay Area, it doesn't feel any safer to have it hidden and like kind of creeping up on the back end. Mm-hmm. Even the fact that we're having these conversations, it goes to show how much still needs to be healed.
Oh yeah.
On the so going back to like ways we've experienced racism, let's talk about the landlord incident.
See, we've had several,
and we've experienced racism together, like as best friends, because you look the way you do and I look the way I do. We've experienced this together. like arm in arm. So I that's something that I want for people out there to really get, is like, you see more of it when you're actually at the intersections of life. I think if you are not at these intersections, it's easy to like allow things. And we're talking about like the subtle shit. We're talking about the subtle stuff. So the landlord situation, I will certainly share this one. So I was living in this this house over here in Oakland, and my housemates all moved out. They all just picked up and moved out in one go. And I was sitting there and I was like, well, I would love to take the place over, especially the way that so many people do in the Bay Area. People move out, one tenant takes over the lease, moves a bunch of other people in, it's all groovy. Well, I'm meeting the landlord for the first time, comes over. Melinda's there because like I'm in this big house by myself, and I'm like, I'm not really trying to be in this creepy house alone.
Well, you asked me to come.
I did. I was like, come over and hang out while I handle this business. And he gets there, he looks at me for 2 seconds, and then he immediately directs all of his conversation to Melinda. Yeah. Stops interacting with me at all. It was like I didn't exist or I didn't matter. I dealt with it. Because one of the things I see is that as a Black person, I cannot step out of my skin. I cannot step out of the context of race or racism. And that's one of the things that I tell people all the time. It's like, if you're saying that you're not going to deal with this conversation, it's a moment to check your privilege, because I can't step out of this conversation. So he ignores me. He talks to you the whole time. It's super awkward.
Oh, it's terrible.
Yeah. Like,
it was terrible because I kept saying, she's the one, and he didn't care. Like, he wasn't going to have the conversation with you.
Right.
And we both, I mean, that experience for us both was like, we just hated it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was at that moment, it was like, I couldn't live in this place regardless. Like, I have to get out of here. It didn't matter at all. And I've had some amazing landlords in the Bay Area, but like that level of prejudice where he just couldn't even make eye contact with me was intense. And it's in the Bay Area, and it was nuanced, and he wasn't calling me names or being overt about it. So it's easy to say, oh, that's not who I am, but it's the microaggressions.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
And it was so obvious. It was like the whole point of him being there was to have a conversation with you. Right. And he just the whole time, yeah, would only talk to me. And even though I kept saying, Marnika. So yeah, that was not a good experience.
Mm-hmm. And I've had that experience possibly more than once. Just not like at restaurants when we're together. It's popped up, and it's an everybody conversation, as we pointed to earlier. Like, it's not just white people and Black people. It's not just Black people in America. It's not just, it's not a Black-white conversation, because everyone is perpetuating this strive and this thing towards lightness, like lighter is better. Yeah. And that reminds me of the incident in Phoenix, actually.
For someone who wasn't even white.
Yeah, do you want to share that one?
Oh, sure. Yeah, so we went to Tucson, Arizona.
Oh, it was at Tucson.
And it was a really important trip for me, and Marnie was my best friend, and I convinced her to come with me, basically. And I had worked for a gemstone company, and I was intended to go with the owner, who was very close to me, and she had passed away. And so Nika and I decided to take the trip. And so it's a whole gem fair, and Marnika, who has a company, got us company passes with her name, Nika Cherrelles, on them. So we didn't have to go the other way, get a ticket, go stand in line and get them there. So we got to just go in with our badges. And so we go in with our badges, that say Nika Cherrelles, we're so excited. I had never been there before, and I'd heard about their fair for like years and years. And the security guard who stopped us at the door, I showed her my badge.
Not us.
It didn't stop me. Yeah, that's the point, right? Didn't stop me at all. I like my pass. I don't think I held it up. I just was wearing it, and he was like, "Yeah." And then Nika, who's like 2 feet away from me, goes, "Oh, let me see your ID." And I just stopped and stared at the man, and he's like, realized that we were both together. He didn't ask to see my ID. He didn't hardly look at my badge. And he noticed, oh, wait, they're together. And was like, instantly realized that he was being racist. And we were both like, yeah, really. And he wasn't even white. It's an everybody conversation.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It is an absolutely everybody conversation. Yeah. I mean, and I'll, to say it like he wasn't white, I think he was Latinx of some or something, maybe, he was in the Southwest. I don't know, but it was like.
But he was like.
And that was the kind of thing that was like, wow, really, really hard to believe. So, I really do believe we can all make a difference by looking at the places where we all have colorism. I know that's one of the topics, like we actually have an episode coming up on colorism in June. I'm really excited about it. And colorism in itself is really this putting lightness and darkness on a spectrum of good and bad.
Yeah.
And that's something that I see people of all ethnicities doing. It doesn't matter, it doesn't matter what their come from is. Mm-hmm. It's a way for people to judge and isolate and assume things about other people and other ethnic groups, or even their own ethnic groups. It makes me completely sad, I must say.
Yeah, it perpetuates racism all around. To have the conversation of colorism is a way that racism is just perpetuated.
Yeah.
I'm looking forward to watching that with you and Sarah.
Yes. I'm really excited about having her on. I think that's going to be really incredible. So I do have another question from the chat. So what were your conversations like around getting married with racism in the world? So like talking about your husband, and did he have any experiences towards this?
Yeah, so my husband is Amharic, and he's from East Africa. And so he's not only dark-skinned, but he also is a foreigner. And so that has definitely come into part of, the perception of us and our marriage. And I think a lot of people, I would say almost a lot of people really had, asked the question, is he, a citizen? That would be like one of the questions first, not just because he's Black, but because he's not from here. And the answer is yes, he was before we ever met. And he served his country as a veteran. But still, yeah, there is that there were several conversations that I had around the fact that my husband is Black, even though he would say he's Amharic, not Black, because where he's from, that's not a thing. Right here, you're Black. But in Africa, you're whatever tribe you're from. And so he also had to come to conversations around being Black in the United States versus being Amharic.
Yeah, that's really big. And I'm really glad that you said that, because it reminds me of the fact that Black and white are not racial ethnicities or identities. Mm-hmm. Like they're actually political constructs. Yeah. And they unify us, they divide us, they do a number of things. And I think that it's very powerful when it comes to this conversation for people, Black people specifically, to get that like Black people the world over deal with discrimination. Mm-hmm. Like it doesn't matter what like ethnicity you are, you're dealing with discrimination. So thank you for bringing up that point.
Oh yeah, you hear an accent, and then there's another. Where are you from? He hates that question because it's the first thing that they ask you, and they hear your voice. They're going to talk to you. Where are you from? It's kind of like the same question. Well, what is he?
Right.
You know.
Right.
It's a similar question.
It is. This was something that I wanted to spend time on at the beginning of the discussion, but when we talked about like the things that we're raised with inside of our families, parenting is so important to healing racism. Like how we raise our children and how the next generation like learns, grows, learns to love each other, whether they pick up this fight or actually pick up the healing, all starts in the home and how we talk to our kids.
Absolutely. Yeah, that really hits home because one of the things that my son is young, he's only 5 months. But one of the things I say to him all the time is he's the best. I'm like, you're the best. And I really want him to grow up hearing that like over and over again, because even if the rest of the world doesn't say that to him, doesn't treat him that way, I want him to have the knowledge that he is the best.
Yeah.
And people in this world, you know, everybody should have the feeling that, you know, they have value and that they're the best in this world. Nobody's better.
Yeah. And I love it that like he's the best, not because of fill in a descriptor, you know, it's just like, no, like, you're alive, you're human, you're the best. Like, this is the best life you can have.
Yeah.
I love that. Yeah. So how we teach our children is going to make a huge difference. And I'm gonna eventually maybe get over free white in 21. Maybe.
I refuse to use that expression, but it's something I've heard countless times from many people that I love, you know, but it's not an expression that I think is gonna be used by me ever.
Yeah, I hope stuff like that does eventually go away in its entirety.
It's an old expression.
Yeah.
You know, but it's handed down, right?
Yeah. That's real. It's handed down. Yeah. These are the things we inherit. Is there anything else you would like to share with our audience or the listeners today?
Oh, well, I just feel really honored to have this conversation with you. When you asked me to have the conversation, I'll be honest, the first thing I thought was, can I have that conversation? Because I do expect there might be some backlash from people that I love, because, you know, I have been confronted by a lot of things that have been said to me, by people I love and people that love me. And I know they love me, and I love them. And so it becomes a harder conversation to have when you might be confronted by those people.
Yeah.
And so I appreciate the love from the comments, and I really do feel honored to be able to have this conversation.
Yeah. Thank you. You know, thank you for actually coming on and being willing to talk about these things, and from a firsthand perspective, because I know that you're right there. You're right there in the heart of it. And some of the things that you shared with me, I'm like, wow, like I'm not even being talked to like that. Like, and there may be, there may be people not loving the fact that this conversation is happening, but that's.
Yeah. So I hope that anyone who listens, whether, you know, they're confronted or not confronted by this conversation, that they get that it's a conversation for the better. And I hope that they do take a look and see where can I have conversations like this, because it isn't everyone conversation. It's, you know, to kind of, I have had that thought, like, is it my place to have conversations? Yes, absolutely. It's everybody's place to have conversations about racism. And it's my place, it's my job to protect my son and have him grow up in a world where everybody can be safe and thrive, you know, not just survive, but really thrive. So yeah, thank you.
Yeah. Yeah, thank you. All right. So we're going to go ahead and wrap up today. I want to say thank you, everyone out there, for joining us. It's been a pleasure speaking with you, and we really do hope these conversations continue to make a difference. The ItCast is our community outreach podcast that aims to increase diversity in conversations on health and sexuality. Through this work, we're creating a space where all people feel loved, honored, and respected. Please visit our Patreon to support the ItCast and learn more about our work at nikacherrelles.com, NIKACHERRELLES.com, and subscribe to the YouTube channel, share it, spread the love, spread the word, let everybody know what we're doing over here to make a difference. Thank you, and we will see you next week.
Thank you.